What's up, folks? It is Friday Eve, Thursday night. For those who like to keep track of the days of the weekend, is episode 186. And let me explain here something for a second, because if you guys remember, my co-host just last week talked about the rebuild of the Flyers. Now, far stretch that it may be, but somehow or another, maybe the hockey gods not only heard what Ryan had to say, but then brought us Jason Myrtetus with us, because if anybody knows anything about the Flyers, this man who lives, breathes, eats hockey, I mean, he can tell you things in his sleep that we all love to hear. Of course, pregame, postgame, the intermission, no one does a better job than Jason Myrtetus. He's going to be on with us. He's waiting there in the green room, and we'd like to thank everyone who joined us over from No Filter Network. We were just on there not too long ago, of course, doing the East Coast, West Coast sports show with myself and Joe Manuel. So I thank you for coming on over. Also, for the people listening on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, and over on AMP Radio, we do appreciate everyone from listening overseas and abroad here, of course, in the U.S. So lots to get into. Obviously, some NHL talk. Yes, the playoffs are still going. Sixers right now down by 10, 58-48. So we're hoping they're going to end up bouncing back here. But again, the bench has got to get hot. So we'll see. Lots to get into. It's just going to be a fun night. And it's always a great time when Jason stops by the studio. I love to have this guy at least twice a month if I possibly could. But I have to pay the man, and we'd have to talk negotiations and all kinds of stuff. But it's always fun to have Jason on. So with that being said, oh, and by the way, before I flip the camera over so you guys can see, just for giggles, just take a wild guess what sweater and or jersey and or hoodie or anything else that the co-host is wearing, as we're going to be playing this game until he finally figures out that which one he'll stick with. So you guys will be surprised with the one he has on tonight. But with that all being said, I thank you all for tuning in. It is episode 186. I thank you for tuning in. I am Angel Martinez. This is Broad Street South, episode 186 with Jason Martinez, and we'll see you right on the other side. Guys happened to guess for some crazy reason that he would be wearing Washington State. So then guess what? Then you're the winner, because I didn't even see that one coming either. So, you keep switching it up. I don't know. Maybe this moment is brought to you by Schweppes. I have no clue. But either way, it is my co-host, Ryan Neff. Ryan, how are you this evening?
Well, I'll first start, and Myrtetus will get this. I'm Ryan Neff. It's great to be with you this evening. But anyway, a lot to talk about in the NHL. Obviously, big Philadelphia Flyer news. The hockey playoffs, obviously. I made a prediction last night that Toronto was going to win 4 straight, beat the Panthers, and I said it, and I told Angel if Toronto wins 4 straight, I'll wear Eagles gear on the show. And that's the most difficult thing for me to do in sports. So let's get Myrtetus on and get right into this, because I'm surprised the man has a voice left after today.
Well, that's right. Again, the pregame, postgame, the intermission, Flyers Daily Podcast with Jason Myrtetus. The last time we were on, it's a new setup too, because the last time we saw some guitars, we saw some other stuff going on there, Jason. But listen, nevertheless,
it's still there.
Been a crazy. Oh yeah, it is back there. So
yeah, a little darker tonight. We're doing a little after dark action.
It's all right. It works. But listen, Jason, first of all, thanks for coming back onto the show. And yeah, it's been quite the busy day for you.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a whirlwind, kind of waiting for all these, new appointments and, the restructuring of the front office. Since they fired Chuck Fletcher, about a week after the trade deadline, Danny Briere was the interim GM. I think we all assumed that he was going to have that tag removed. That came to fruition this morning, along with, the naming of Keith Jones as the president of hockey operations. And I will tell you, I talked to a lot of people. I did not see that one coming. I really didn't. Jonesy's had a really good broadcast career post-playing. Mm-hmm. He did some radio here in Philadelphia. That's how he started. And, then got into broadcasting some Flyers pre- and post-game, and then became, the analyst on the Flyers television broadcast locally. And then obviously the national gig started back with Versus, if you can believe it, after the NHL lockout in 2005. And he's been doing that for, I guess, 17, 18 years now. But he's named the president of hockey operations. He'll put the broadcasting career on hold, and we'll see if this new structure and this new front office can pave the way in a very difficult NHL to rebuild this thing and get the Flyers back in the run, amongst the upper echelon of teams in this league and try and fight for that Stanley Cup chalice.
So how much, Ryan, before I spin it over to you, how much for John, obviously coming back for a second year, because you only did a 2-year deal with the Flyers, How much motivation now does it carry him? Because I mean, he let it all out last season. He wasn't holding anything back. Obviously, the Flyers
He
fans
did a
didn't know
4-year
this.
deal, by the way.
4 year?
4-year deal, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was for some reason I thought it was 2, but maybe it was just me, Jason, because I've been hard on the Flyers, obviously for obvious reasons, because we just haven't seen anything in production from these guys in years, at least 5-6 years. So I'm wondering how much does that motivate now John going into next season, because I mean it's a big change. It's finally the move in the right direction that all of us wanted to see.
Well, I mean, let me just take one piece of that real quick. Because in 1920, they were legitimately a good team. They finished with a really good record. They only played 69 games because of the pandemic, but they were legitimately a good team that year. I mean, they were 7th in scoring and 7th in goals allowed. 2 great categories. The underlying numbers were good. They were a really good team. Obviously, the pandemic hit. They never really got back to that. Matt Niskanen retired, and that sent them on a dog chasing its tail, trying to find the replacement for Niskanen. And they made some bad decisions. Some players didn't handle the pandemic well. They didn't handle the flat cap well, and that's where we are today. But overall, basically since 2012, it's been some false, empty promises of the team moving forward in a sustainable direction, and that hasn't happened. And that leads us to where we are now. As far as Torts goes, though, I mean, I think Torts is really pragmatic. There's a lot of things about Torts that I've always been a big fan of his and thought that he should come here to Philadelphia because I just think he fits
Right.
from the mentality of the area, of this fan base, and everything that goes with it. But I didn't realize how kind of evolved he is when it comes to technique and handling players and everything from the way he practices his team too. I mean, they didn't practice the last 6 weeks of the season. He's not going to just put them on the ice for diminishing returns for no reason. It's about quality, not quantity of time on the ice. So, Torts is a guy that there's a lot of preconceived notions about Torts. A lot of it's not true. The biggest notion about Torts is that he'll be out of there in a year and a half. He's going to piss everybody off. Yet, of any active coach in the NHL, he's got the longest average per tenure of any coach in the league. Gerard Gallant's got the tenure sustainability that everybody thinks John Tortorella has,
Right.
but doesn't. So, and he came into this eyes wide open too, knowing that this past year, that was really a year to find out who's who and what's what, who's part of the solution, who's part of the problem. And he was not shy at the end of the year at saying, talking to him on my podcast many times, the first thing we got to do, the first step of anything we do is we got to subtract. We got to get some guys out of here. Now, some of that is players that don't fit from a culture standpoint, players that don't fit from a timeline standpoint of where they are in their career, their age, players that don't fit because of what they're making and they can't perform to the number. So all of those things, you got to have subtraction. You got to replace those players. It's, you can't go on the ice now with 12 players like a beer league. You dress 18 skaters and 2 goalies, but you got to move this thing forward. And he's been pretty forthcoming with, this offseason is not about going out there and finding high-ticket guys. It's about backfilling and giving some more young guys and the young guys that took steps forward last year more opportunity to continue to do that. They got to turn it over to a young core. And this is a young man's league now. And, they like the steps that a lot of guys took last year. Mm-hmm. But you got to see, can they repeat it and, keep moving forward? Some of those guys like Morgan Frost who had a really good second half, or Owen Tippett, can they do it again? And can they keep getting better? Because that's what you got to find out. And there's other guys that are coming up that they're going to have to get a look at to see if, they're part of the solution around here, whether that's Elliot Denwye or that Tyson Forster full-time or Ronnie Attard and Sam Erison as the backup goaltender. All of those things are still big questions to be answered here. But you can't microwave it. You got to do it the right way. And, I think with this group, these 3 guys, with Keith Jones, Danny Briere, and John Tortorella, I think that they're gonna not rush anything. They're gonna do it the proper way, so it's sustainable when you do get the returns for the patient and the pain that you're going through now.
Jason, with all that being said, now that Jonesy is leaving the broadcast booth, president, you got Briere, GM. Jonesy in the past has stated that he could, he figures Philadelphia to be one of the mainstays in the NHL. He's made no bones about it, but no really front office experience that I can remember. I think, so I know they have the 7th pick in the draft. Where the hell are they going to turn to? and what are they going to do in the offseason here? Because Flyers fans really want to know.
Well, it's weird, Rob, because so many of the fans, like I see this conflicting message a lot of times. That they need to do a proper rebuild. They need to tear it down. They need to do this. But then when the Flyers go out with a depleted roster of, torn down players and stuff, and then they lose, they go, "This is such a damn embarrassment. This is pathetic." Well, you're the one calling for them to tear it down. You're not gonna tear it down and just get better right away, right?
Right.
So, but let me speak to Jonesy real quick first. I've known him a really long time, about 23, 24 years now, since he retired. Because I was at WIP when he, began his broadcast career. And when Jonesy retired, he was real good friends with Al Morgani. And he's trying to figure out, what do I do next? He wasn't planning on retiring. He had a knee injury he signed a new contract. He played about 5 games, I think, into the new contract, 3-year deal, and just couldn't go anywhere, couldn't skate. And he was trying to figure out what he was going to do. And he just started coming in with the morning show at WIP with Ange and Al and everybody. And Jonesy didn't get paid for about the first 2.5 years. But he showed up 2-3 days a week to prove he had value, work on his craft, see if it was something that he could do, and eventually proved his value and started obviously getting paid. And he's parlayed that into the analyst work and with the Flyers and nationally. And he's very good at it. Jonesy's an interesting guy because there's a perception about Keith Jones, and the perception is because it's the one that he's put out there. Like, he's the king of fart jokes, very pedestrian locker room humor, those kind of things. And he presents himself as being real aloof, like, I'm not out there cracking really working hard and researching. It's all bullshit. The guy knows his stuff. And he's the most intelligent guy I know that tries to hide it. You know what I mean? And you don't get to where he is on the national stage and everything else unless you are intelligent. He's a really smart hockey guy, and he's incredibly well respected around the league. I know he's friends with Joe Sakic and has been almost an advisor for him for years. When he would travel for Flyer games, all the other coaches and all the other GMs always wanted to talk to him and pick his brain about stuff because he really knows the league. So I think he'll be a tremendous asset. Will this whole crew work, this triumvirate with Tortorella, Briere, and Keith Jones? I don't know. Nobody knows, and nobody can say they do know. The only time we'll know is if you do it and it does work. Like, I'm not going to make any promises that this crew is going to lead them to a cup and end the drought. None of that, because I got questions too. What is the role of the president of hockey operations? What are his responsibilities? What's he judged on? There's a lot of elements that go into this. So, but this offseason, Flyer fans and Philadelphia sports fans are so conditioned that when there's a shiny toy available on the market, that not only should they go get it, but if they don't get it, they lost it. They lose something they didn't even have, right?
Right.
And you can't do that. If you didn't have it, you didn't lose it, but you didn't get it, so they feel like they lost it. But that's because that's what's always happened here. When Ed Snyder was the owner, if there was a player with big name value, he went and got him. The Eagles, the same thing. Every time there's a big-time player out there available, Howie Roseman's in the mix. It's always been that way in Philadelphia sports. And it's given us this kind of false sense of we're entitled to every other star over everybody else. But, this offseason, if you have high expectations for big name additions and this huge jump in the standings next year, I'd say get your expectations under control, because that's not in the cards, I don't think.
Well, just to follow it up, I just want to get your take on something. We had Missinelli on about a month ago. Perhaps you've heard of him.
Why?
Perhaps you've heard of him. But he said that what the organization and the fan base need to get away from is the old Broad Street bully mentality. That's way in the past. It's gone. They're never going to get that back. They should look forward in a different direction. What say you, my friend?
Well, I will tell you that that's probably the first time Mike has had an opinion on hockey that I agree with in 20 years that I've known Mike. Because usually Mike's hockey knowledge can fill a thimble. But anyway, no, he's right, though. I mean, the league is not that league anymore. And I actually think where Mike's wrong, though, is that the team has gotten away with it. Problem is I think they've gotten away from it too much. They went from being, the Broad Street Bullies, the tough team and blah, 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 to becoming, they overcorrected the steering wheel and crashed the car into a tree. You know, when a squirrel runs out in the road, you just got just a little movement of the steering wheel. Don't get crazy and go like that. Then you end up in somebody's front yard. They overcorrected and they went too far the other way, and they became too soft and they were too easy to play against. There's a balance in the middle. And today's NHL, you got to have speed, you got to have skill, you have to have depth, and it's harder to get depth now than it ever has because there's not 21 teams in this league, there's 32. 16 teams make it, 16 teams don't. And if you're going to have success, you have to have 4 lines. And, players that, with as many jobs that are available with 32 teams, I mean, there's players in the league that, if there were 21 teams, they'd be in the East Coast Hockey League, not even in the AHL. So it's harder to do that now than ever. But you have to have an organizational philosophy. You have to have an organizational DNA. You have to know what you are and be it. And you have to have, accountability at all levels. Building a hockey team in a 32-team NHL league, to me, there's 3 very key categories. And you cannot, I don't even want to say fail, you can't even be below par or below very good in any of them if you want to succeed. And here they are. Number 1, it's the roster construction of the players on the field of play, on the ice, how they fit together, how they play together, how your depth is. That's piece number 1. That's what we all see when we turn on the television or we go to the game. Piece number 2 is how those pieces and players and personnel and coaches and managers and everything fit together off the ice from an accountability and culture standpoint. And then piece 3 is the fiscal element, which is the cap. These pieces have to fit together so that you can, and it's not easy. It's a lot of different elements here with the cap. You got to have players that you're paying the right amount of money at the right time. You can't have guys making too much money. You got to get contributions from guys on entry-level contracts that aren't making much money. You need goaltending. You need D. You need depth. And you need all those things to work, or you are not going to succeed in today's NHL. It's just not going to happen. No star player is going to fix that. Winning the lottery last week wouldn't have fixed that. I look at a team like the Edmonton Oilers. They won the lottery 4 times in 6 years. They had Taylor Hall, number 1, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, and the best player to ever put skates on, in my opinion, Connor McDavid. And they have Leon Draisaitl, who they took 3rd. They've won 3 playoff series since 2006. That's crazy. So think about that. So no one player is going to fix it, but you have to have all of those 3 elements clicking on very, very smooth cylinders to have any chance of success. And it's going to take everybody to do their job and hold themselves accountable.
That is all great points, and I want to bring up 2 comments here. One is Mike Klein, obviously the president of the Philly of the South football club out there in Tampa. Go Birds, as everybody's excited with the schedule that came out this year. Just tonight, obviously, for the NFL. And then the Bleacher Brothers with AJ Luch and the Duncan Dad. Great show last night with those guys. If you guys want to check them out on the No Filter Network, that's where we'll be heading as well come next week once everything gets tested out and doing well. So with the Bleacher Brothers, hello, guys. There are guys coming on. And I want to bring up because, you brought up great points as far as, the team's getting younger. Obviously, a lot of the speed. We saw that last year with Colorado, not so much this year. Obviously, the Kraken doing great and wonderful things to this point during the NHL playoffs so far. But just to kind of flip it back here for a second, do you believe at all, Jason, that Jonesy maybe have like any inkling that this was actually going to happen?
I don't know. I have dinner with him before every game. The broadcasters, we sit together and have dinner before every game. We never really talked about it. About that. His name was always like one of those ones that some people would mention. He'd be a guy that'd be really good at that role and he'd be an interesting candidate. But, we heard all these names coming out. There was a lot of reporting. Flyers did a good job of masking the guy who ended up with the job in Keith Jones. Because, we heard Eddie Olczyk. We heard, in the beginning, Ray Shero. We've heard all kinds of different, Doug Wilson, who was the GM in San Jose for 14 years, is a real tenured guy. We heard some other, big names out there. And then all of a sudden, Jonesy comes out of the weeds with the gig. So, I think they really buttoned down the hatches when it came down to who they ultimately ended up hiring. And from what I understand, now that it's announced that, it's been known for about a week that, this was what was going to happen. They had to work out, obviously, the contract for him and, he's got to deal with TNT and the contract that he's under there, so it's a little complicated. Right. They're in the middle of a playoff run. The guy's scheduled to work every night. When you become the president of a team, you can't be going out and being an analyst on playoff games. So
Right.
they had to work through all that. But yeah, I don't know if I don't know if that was something like a goal of his that he's had for a long period of time. I'm not sure, but I'm sure he'll speak to that coming up tomorrow. But he's just such a laid back guy, you know. He's kind of the mayor of the rink when he's walking around. You know, he's such a good guy, so funny to be around, so quick, and you know, just really knows the game so well and knows, you know, the entire league so incredibly well. So, you know, those guys that played the game like he did, that weren't just full of buckets of pure God-given skill, that
Right.
had to grind. I mean, he went to Western Michigan. I mean, if you read his book, like his story, like, I mean, he couldn't make a junior A team when he was coming up into college and stuff. So he's all self-made from a hockey player standpoint, and he's been that way, you know, post-playing as well. So I'm happy for him. I obviously, you know, I'm biased. I like the guy. I've known him for a long time. Still calls me boss because I was his boss at WIP, but I'm no longer the boss. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see what he can do because I do believe that he's a really sharp, you know, hockey mind.
All right, Myrtetus, let's get to the playoffs. Obviously, the curse of the President's Trophy lives. I don't think really anybody saw that coming, although in the regular season, Florida did get in fits a little bit. I didn't see Colorado going out in the first round either. That the NHL playoffs are the best playoffs in sports, period. Because you have no idea what's going to happen in a 7-game series. So, how surprised are you that Boston and Colorado are out, and let's say Seattle and, I mean, Vegas is no surprise, obviously. Edmonton is no surprise. I think Seattle's a little bit of a surprise. But don't you think right now it's kind of like maybe Carolina or Vegas is to lose at this point?
I don't know. I can't discount Florida. I mean, they're the odds-on favorite right now in Vegas.
Yep.
You know, they're up 3-1. I thought Toronto played great last night and just really took away the entire middle of the ice in the D zone. They just gave them nothing. But is that a sustainable formula for Toronto? I don't know. Toronto's not going to come back and win that series. Sorry, Rye. They don't have
No.
they don't have the belly the way that team is built to do it. You know, teams that come back from that, the Flyers did it in 2010. That was a team that had belly. You know, the LA Kings did it, I think in 2012, and got back in from being down 3-0. Toronto doesn't have it. So they're going to get knocked out. And Florida's really good. I mean, they got some players, and I give Bill Zito a lot of credit because, you know, he had a Hart Trophy candidate that he traded, and Jonathan Huberdeau, you know, part of that deal to get Matthew Tkachuk, and boy, has that guy been fantastic in these playoffs. So he's a playoff type performer, and they're getting good goaltending from Sergei Bobrovsky. You just got to hope if that sustains. I like Florida to come out of the East because I think they'll out goaltend the Carolina Hurricanes, and I think that they've got more big time players so far through these playoffs. Svechnikov being out for Carolina hurts them a lot. You know, he's not a huge point guy, but he's a talented, skilled player that they're missing. So I think that's an element that hurts them. In the West, though, you're right. I mean, name me 2 players on Seattle. You know what I mean? That is not. It's crazy that. I mean, they're a team of second and third. They have 2 second lines and 2 third lines. They have no first line and no fourth line.
Right.
But it's all about depth, right? And they're getting good goaltending from Grubauer. And, you know, whose goaltending is going to sustain, whose is going to falter is the big question there in the West for me. Brassard just went out. Obviously, the other night it hurt for Vegas, so that's now a big question mark. And then, I don't know who's going to come out of there. I tend to think that the team that's coming out of the West is going to be Vegas, but again, that's a big question mark without the goaltender, with Brassard being hurt. So I like Florida to win the Cup, oddly enough, which would be crazy because they won the President's Trophy last year and got knocked out in the second round by Washington, or got past Washington and got knocked out in the second round, by Tampa. But I don't know. You're right. The NHL playoffs are crazy because in that one day, Boston got knocked out, and the Stanley Cup champions got knocked out by a second-year expansion team. That's crazy.
Do you what do you think about Nurse's suspension? Is it going to hurt him?
Doesn't help. I mean, it was dumb to do that, to slash a guy. Because you can't slash him in the hands or the wrist. You can break a bone in there so easy. Imagine if Draisaitl broke a bone in his wrist and was out for the rest of the playoffs. I mean, the guy's got 15 goals or whatever. in like 9 games. He had 6 goals in the first 2 games of that series. And you just take a lazy shot at him at his wrist. Like, that's. You want to take a shot? You want to swing a stick at him? Go ahead. Just swing it at his shin pads. But don't go for a guy's hands. Like, that's a dick move and a half. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he's a great. Draisaitl might be the best player in the world right now. Certainly playing like it. And, the league cannot let that just fly when a guy chops at a guy's hands like that. It was really unlike Pietrangelo. I was really surprised. He's usually a pretty poised guy. But playoffs, when that chalice is on the line, man, guys get crazy. They do dumb shit.
They do. Well, we saw it the same way with the Lightning. I mean, the Lightning, there was a couple of games where there should have been some penalties called, and there was nothing there. Now, again, as fans, we expect for the penalties to be there, but then and a couple, there was about 3 or 4, Jason. It was more than blatant obvious what should have been called, and it basically was either waved off or they got the 2-minute minor. One, they went back. It was supposed to be run to the boards. First, they said it was going to be a 5-minute major. They brought him back on the ice, thought about it, put him over the bench. Then it was going to be a 5-minute minor. Then they decided, no, there was no infraction, so they gave him 2 minutes on the bench, 2-minute minor. So I would hate to say it like the NBA or anything else. We don't think that the NHL refs are by any means fixed to win these games. At least I'd hope not. But no, that last night, that was just a huge, huge, huge mistake. And I don't know, you lose your cool. I understand, because again, you're going after Lord Stanley. We know but the Flyers have, I think, 2 more seasons before their name's, off the cup. So, I mean, there's a lot to fight for. But some of these penalties and the way some of these games are going is beyond me. But it is. And NHL playoffs is super exciting. The more I see it every year and year in and year out, even, throughout the regular season. Some people say, it's a long time before we get to the playoffs. But you start to see a lot more drama with these teams. And I think that's what's making hockey more and more exciting for a lot of folks. And just, it's fun. Even, yes, down here in Tampa, of course, you see the folks. They've 2-time champs, back-to-back champs here, 3-time altogether, but back-to-back champions. To be eliminated this year. Cooper's doing an amazing job with those guys, and hopefully they'll turn back around come next year. But hockey's a different beast. Playoff time is completely different. One season I got into it so much that I end up picking up a Canadian accent because I watched just literally every single freaking game. But it was fun though, because I had friends ask me, I thought you were from Philly. I am. What's with the Canadian accent? I watch hockey. I don't know what else to tell you, but it's fun. It's very exciting.
Yeah, the playoffs, it's like a different sport. It's all of a sudden, as soon as the playoffs start in that first round, it's just so bananas that the intensity level is just ratcheted so high, and the sacrifice and everything it takes to win that trophy is so evident. That's what makes it so great. But yeah, you're right. I think the playoff overall in both rounds so far, the officiating's been really inconsistent. Mm-hmm. Look, players won't have a problem with it. Just be consistent so we know where the line is on everything. And if we have that infraction and they have that infraction, the same circumstance or same result happens. And that's the thing that's been frustrating, I think, because it's been inconsistent and it hasn't been up to a good enough standard. But the second round's been a little weird too. There's been some really lopsided games. Right. First round is always great, and it's chaos. The second round's been a little underwhelming, I think, so far. We'll see if it ratchets back up for the conference final. But the officiating, I think, has been something that is definitely going to be talked about and looked at when this season's over, in regards to how it's played out here in the playoffs. Because these guys work too hard, they sacrifice too much to not have consistent and quality enough officiating.
Yeah, we got Jersey and Carolina tied 2 apiece with about 2 minutes left. So about the Devils, Jason, were you kind of surprised how quickly they turned it around? Just a couple years ago, they stank. Let's be honest.
They were 2 points ahead of the Flyers in the standings 2 years ago. They had 63 points. The Flyers finished with 61. Yeah. That was last year, by the way, not this year. This year, they had the biggest points turnaround in NHL history. Now, you look at it and, so you can't go, well, the Flyers should have that same kind of turnaround because they don't have the pieces that the Devils had. They're not at the same place in the rebuild the Devils are. The Devils have 2 number 1 overall picks in Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes. Hughes really took a huge step this year from being a good NHL player to fulfilling the promise of a number 1 overall pick and being a star player. That's number one. And Heischer's a big part of that too, as a number one overall pick, the captain, a guy that can really do it all. But then the acquisition of Dougie Hamilton, the goaltending there is still a big question for me. Are they going to get? I don't think you can ride two goaltenders going back and forth between Vanacek and Schmid in the playoffs. I think you have to have the guy. So I think that's going to end up catching up with them. And ultimately, if you don't have goaltending, it doesn't matter what you have in front of them. Because if you don't have that one element, you are just dead to rights. I mean, if you're a team in the NHL and you want to tank, just get a shitty goalie. Because you have no choice but to lose. Because it affects everything in front of them, too, the way the players play and everything. So I don't know if I think Carolina is going to take care of New Jersey and get out of this series, but it is a huge step forward for the Devils. There's no question about it. Lindy Ruff, I think, has done a great job there. And they got some good players. They made some good moves, and they built that thing, the right way and took their time, and they look like a team that's got sustainability too.
And Angel, I've got to ask Myrtetus about my Blackhawks. They went all in late 2010, 2013, 15. Then I knew it was going to be sufferable, for the last, 8, 9 years. I know they got the first pick in the draft, but every time I look at this organization and what they're all over the place. I don't know what the hell they're trying to do, Jason. Enlighten me.
I wish I knew. I mean, look. I mean, they outwardly tanked. I mean, you're trading 24-year-old 40-goal scorers and DeBrincat this offseason, not even getting a great return. I mean, they did everything they could to suck, and they did. They sucked.
Yeah.
And they end up with the third worst record, but they get the number one overall pick. And they get Bedard, and they go right from Patrick Kane, who was the number one overall pick in 2007, right to Bedard. I mean, unbelievable. But getting the number one pick and getting a generational player is no guarantee. I mean, think about this fact. This is an insane number that I'll give you right now. Since 1980, this is full-blown expansion. It's not an original six anymore, but since 1980, only 10 number one overall picks have won a Stanley Cup. You believe that? Now, a couple of them won multiple. Mario Lemieux won 2. Crosby's won 3, right? But only 10 number one picks since, 43 years have won the Stanley Cup. Again, it just speaks to the fact that you got to build a team. And you can't just get, drafting Connor Bedard or drafting Connor McDavid or drafting Eric Lindros or whoever was no guarantee that you're going to win the Cup. And, they have literally nobody to play with Bedard right now. I mean, you look at their roster, you couldn't pick them out of a lineup. They have no names there. So we'll see what they're able to do. But it's going to be some more years of pain. And I know the tickets are flying out the door like hotcakes in Chicago to get back in. But, I mean, you're not going to be looking at good hockey. You're going to have a spectacle in the player, and he's going to be fantastic, I think. But don't expect wins with that team right away because they're not going to win. They have no players there for him to play with. None. I mean, McDavid came in, and they had Draisaitl, and they had Nugent Hopkins, Taylor Hall, and all those guys. Chicago's got nobody. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I mean, people are pissed that they got it because of the Kyle Beach situation, the sexual abuse story that they covered up, and a lot of people felt like they should have lost their first round pick instead of just getting a fine. So there's been some things there, and I don't think there's any honor in tanking either. I really don't. I think it puts a stink on your franchise that doesn't wash off your hands. When you accept losing in sports, to me that's really bad, and they did everything they could to lose. They got rewarded for it, but we'll see where it goes from here.
I agree. Although, hold on, Mr. Black Hawk, because either way, but in case you guys are just joining us right now, we have from the Flyers Daily, Jason Myrtetus here with us on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game, along with over on Amp Radio and live here on Broad Street South as well. But Jason, I want to say thank you so much just for putting that one in his place, saying that they can forget about winning because he hasn't rubbed enough in my face about his goofy Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. So I'm so glad that you made that point to him, and more than the obvious that yes, you're not going to be winning anything anytime soon. So thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not a Black Hawk hater. There's a lot of people out there that are. I didn't think the the draft. I know the draft lottery is not fixed. There's a representative. All these people are crying conspiracy. Oh, they fixed it so Chicago could get it because they just lost Kane. And it's a big market and it's good for the NHL. It is a big market and it's good for the NHL.
Right.
But do you think the representative of the other 15 lottery teams are going to sit back there and watch them fix it?
No.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And this is just about every team in the NHL is worth more than $1 billion. The league's worth billions of dollars, billions and billions of dollars. If you were to fix a draft lottery and it ever got out and was proven, your $1 billion league is kaputs.
Yeah.
It's gone because there's no integrity to it. So do you think a league would risk that to put a player in Chicago? No, hell no. So those people need to get a grip. Stop with the stupid conspiracies. He ended up there. Sometimes the math works and the worst team gets him. Don't forget, the worst team still had, an 82.5 or 81.5% chance of not getting him. Mm-hmm. And they didn't, Anaheim. They got the second pick.
So I'm going to go to Toronto. Toronto got past the first round. They, quashed that jinx. But my God, I know they're running into a buzzsaw against Florida. But if they go out in the second round like they're about to, getting spanked, where do they go from here?
They lose in 5. I think it's even worse than getting knocked out in the first round, I'll be honest with you. You thought maybe they got out of the first round, they got the monkey off their back. Now they can just kind of exhale and move forward and be a really good team in the playoffs and maybe, win a couple more rounds, get to a cup or get to a conference final. But boy, they've just been out-competed in the second round. And their biggest name players haven't done anything. Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander I think has been pretty good. But Matthews, Marner, and Tavares just haven't earned the paycheck that they get. And they don't have tremendous depth because they pay those 4 players so much of the percentage of cap. So, I think they got to look at that thing and go, what are we doing here? Like, when are we going to realize that we have to make some substantial change, whether that's moving on from a guy like Matthews that is going to be due a new contract after next year, or moving on from Mitch Martin. You got to do something different, because if you're just getting to the same spot and you can't get past it, then you got to make a change. So I don't know what they're going to do. After they won the first round, everybody was saying, contract extension for Kyle Dubas, he can write his ticket, and Sheldon Keefe and all these guys. But, they've been embarrassed in this second round, in my opinion. So they go out in 5 games. All bets are off. You got to make changes, and I got to look at the top, too. I got to look right at Kyle Dubas.
Well, it's almost like there's no ferocity there. It's almost like they try to play a finesse game, and they've just been out physical in this series.
Yeah, they're a regular season team. You can just outscore teams in the regular season in hockey. You can win games 6-3 and 6-4, and do that all day. But when you get to the playoffs, every inch of the ice is contested, so it's a different game. Like, we know it just by looking at it how different it is, and how every inch of the ice is a battle zone. And that's a team that doesn't want to battle. They're not made up like that. Look, Tampa didn't win anything until they went out and they got guys like Barclay Goodrow, Pat Maroon. Guys like that, Blake Coleman, those are the guys that made a difference. They had all the skill. They had Stamkos, they had Hedman, they had Vasilevsky and Point and Kucherov and Palat and Killorn, all those guys. But they needed some guys out there that really caused some accountability for the other team. Toronto don't have any of that. They don't. None of it.
Nope,
Well, case in point, I saw you posted on Twitter about the Gudas hit.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people were saying that was a penalty, but that's what this series has been about for Florida. They've just been rougher, tougher, in their head, and Toronto wants no part of it, and you can tell.
Yeah, they're more committed. And, some people said that had a problem with the hit. They said, well, it was after the whistle. But when the whistle blew, Gudas is so far into the hit, and you watch it, and you can stop it when the whistle blew, stop the video, but you can't stop your body and inertia when the whistle blows. And he was so committed to the hit. He blew him up. I thought it was a clean hit. I'd say 96% of the people that responded to that tweet that I put out, and it's about 200 responses, said it's a clean hit. Some people said it's boarding, he should be suspended. I think that's not understanding what the game's like at full speed and playing in a 7-game series in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And that's the way Gudis plays. You got to know when he's out there. I mean, he blew him up. Don't look at the result of the player having to leave the game. That happens. You can't guys get hurt on clean hits. It happens. You can't judge what happened by the result. So, I mean, to me, it was a clean hit, and I'll take a defenseman like that puts the fear of God in the guys when they're on the ice every day. And Goody does have. I mean, he's a great guy to us. It's so funny, but his beard is enormous now. But he's the kind of guy you need on a team that's going to win a cup. You do. You need guys like him.
Yeah, call me crazy, but did I hear, or am I hearing correctly, that the New York Rangers are possibly thinking about Chuck Knobloch? What is
New York
Chuck?
Rangers?
Huh?
To do what? What's Chuck Knobloch going to do? Not throw the ball to first base?
That's what I'm trying to.
Any problems with that?
Because there was supposedly something that was said that maybe they were thinking about giving him the nod as far as being a coach. I'm like, what?
No, they're probably talking about Chris Knobloch.
Is that what it is?
It's got to be.
Not Chuck. Chuck used to play for
Knobloch.
the Twins.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Listen, all I know is that's
Chris
what
Knobloch
I heard.
was an assistant coach for the Flyers, as a matter of fact. He coached Connor McDavid and Erie.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when I heard it,
coached the Phantoms for a little bit too.
but when I heard it, I'm thinking like, wait a minute, why in the world would Chuck want to? What's it got to do with anything? So I know what I heard, but obviously the person who was translating it obviously didn't say the correct name. But I started giggling like, wait, what does baseball have anything to do with hockey? And what in the world could he possibly take a mitt out there and just show him exactly how to catch? That didn't make any sense to me. But then again, now it makes complete sense. But I wanted to bring it up because that's what I heard. So again, sometimes it's like playing telephone. Someone's going to say something, you get to hear what's going to happen there at the very end of it.
They're going to put baseballs onto the ice. Shoot the baseball.
Going to take grounders.
All right, Myrtetus, with the 7th pick in the NHL draft, the Flyers take
Connor Bedard. He's going to slip to 7. I mean, it's tough predicting the 7th pick because you don't know what's going to take place in front of the Flyers. It's an interesting draft. Obviously, it's a really good draft. It's been pointed at for many years now as being one of the really good deep drafts where you can get a lot of good talent. And it's headlined, obviously, by a player that we would look at and say that definitely generational. A guy at 143 points outscored McDavid in his draft year in junior. So, it depends who's there. The interesting thing is a lot of the mocks you look at, the first 8, 9 picks in the draft are all forwards. And it is a forward-laden draft. And, I wonder if, what you get to like pick 5 or pick 6 before the Flyers, and a team goes, I'm picking this high. I don't want the 5th best forward in the draft. I want the number 1 ranked D-man, a guy like David Reinbacher or something like that. Because that'll shift all the forwards down a notch if that happens. And we know the value of D-men in the NHL. There's been some risers, guys that after the U18s, their stock has climbed. A guy like Dvorsky. Obviously, you look at a guy like Will Smith, who had a great tournament for U.S., and he's a guy that's going to be taken probably before the Flyers get there as well. I think there's a few guys you look at. If Dvorsky does slip, Dalibor Dvorsky, I think he's a guy the Flyers will be comfortable with. I think Ryan Leonard is absolutely a guy that's going to BC this year. Going to be playing with Cutter Gauthier there. I think they'd be interested in him. Gabe Peralt's another guy that they may be interested in. If Leo Carlsson were to slip, they'd be interested. But, again, I don't know what's going to happen in front of them. I guess the big question, though, is if Michkov is there. He's this dynamic, talented player, but he's locked into a KHL contract for 3 years. And we all know that everything going on in Russia, you just don't know when you're going to get a guy like that over here. And, if you knew he was coming in 2 or 3 years, definitively now for sure, that's different. But you don't know that. So I think there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of hesitation. He's a dynamic, get the butt of the fans out of the seat star. But can you afford to incur any of that risk of not getting him over here in any kind of timely fashion? So how it plays out, I don't know. I'll say, Ryan Leonard would be a guy that I would look at. Or I really like Dvorsky too. Great release and, They need some dynamic players and dynamic skaters, and guys with speed that can really stress an opponent at that end of the ice. So, and you look at a guy like Leonard. He's a guy that can play on the wing or he can play in the middle, and I think that's a big part of it as well. You want a little bit of versatility when you're roster building, because you got to be good down the middle. You got to be good at your center position. There's some question marks there. Obviously, is Morgan Frost going to take another big step forward? What's the status of Sean Couturier going forward? So that'll give you a little versatility. So I would probably look at those two guys about where they're drafting. Well, I'll give you three. I'll give you Leonard, Dvorsky, and Peralt.
What about the kid Fantilli from Michigan? Is he any good?
Yeah, he'll be gone.
He'll be
Yeah,
gone?
he's gonna be long gone. Yeah, he's going to Anaheim. He's to me, he's not a generational player. Bedard's generational, but Fantilli's got the makings of a superstar, a guy I would put in this. I look at like McDavid as a generational player. Austin Matthews is a superstar. I put Fantilli kind of in that conversation. I think he just controls the game in a different way with the way he's built and the way he plays. So I said, yeah, he'll be going. He's going to Anaheim, and I think he's gonna be fantastic.
Angel.
Oh, all I know, it's been an interesting series so far. I'm glad again with the Flyers finally making some moves, so I can stop pretty much riding them the way I've been doing it all season long. And again, the things had to change, but I'm glad the Flyers are going in the right direction. And obviously, before we start kind of wrapping things up here, because the Eagles come out with the schedule with the NFL, and hold on, before I even say that, let me, Myrtetus, let me ask you this much: if, let's just say hypothetically, Jonesy says, "Hey, let's go out to dinner Saturday night," and you agree upon it, and he says, "How about if you take my spot in TNT?" Would you go for it?
Dang, look at me. I'm not putting me on TNT. Are you crazy?
Hey,
I
listen,
was going to ask you if the
TNT.
Flyers called him for the president's job.
right there,
Yeah,
right.
no.
Listen, for the sports
I
knowledge
am
that you
way
have,
down on the pecking order, boys. You're giving me too much credit.
that's right. As a fan, I'm just saying, I think it would be a great show. But yeah, then again, who knows?
Hey,
But
he,
yeah,
he put up with Missinelli for what? 4 years? 5 years?
6.5.
So he should,
Not
be,
that I was
he
counting.
should be primed and ready for a GM spot or a president spot.
Yeah, right. I mean, look, you get when you work with big personalities, it comes with great reward and a lot of aggravation at times. I actually worked great with Mike. Mike and I got along really well because I was Mike's boss at WIP, so it was a little bit different than like his other producers. And when I first started working with him at the Fanatic on the show, about a month or two in, we had a blow up, and he's like, I'm not happy, but I'll text you. I said, no, we're not gonna text, no keyboard warrior stuff. I just said, look, your other producers, whatever, but I'll just roll. I don't care. Like, I'm not begging to be here. So we came to an understanding real quick, and the rest is history. I think we did some really good radio together, and with great ratings and created some great radio. And I just wish sports radio was still, kind of like that, but it's not anymore. It's just so repetitive.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it was like today. Oh, jeez. Going through the
Yeah.
schedule. Oh, Jesus. It's the most painful sports radio in the world. Give him a win, dog. Give him a rush. It's like, oh, Jesus. And then you got to hear another call already and tell you why they're going, 17-2, and it's just like insane.
Yeah.
But look, you got to, and I guess in that business, you got to just continue to talk about the same thing over and over again. I never was a proponent of it. That's why I'm glad I don't do it anymore, but that's the way it is.
well, if I can clear my throat here for a second, that's why Sports Radio 102.9 was kind of invented here, because it's going to be a different angle from what you normally get on the radio. So, I'm just saying, you would like to come over and like shoot it up with us, by all means, it's the open invite, because it's the same way too. I mean, regular radio, as far as sports radio, it's a lot of it obviously becomes beyond scripted. Number one, number two, they're trying to really tame it down to where you really can't say what you would like to say anymore without either getting in trouble for it. And a lot of it, even here in the Tampa region, I mean, a lot of stuff. I mean, you can't even use darn anymore. It's got to be like gosh or something else. And I think from where radio's come from a long time ago to where it is right now, it's a completely different beast. I mean, it's nowhere where, I mean, you have a lot of broadcasters that are finally going away and either starting their own podcast or
Yeah.
thinking about what they're doing next, because it's just it's a dinosaur. It's not anywhere, Jason, where it used to be before. It's a dying breed, unfortunately, and
Yeah, it's
it
become
never used to be that way.
yeah, it's become two things, just like incredibly repetitive and hot takes.
Yeah,
And the hot takes are just to me the most disingenuous thing in the world. Just saying something outlandish to get a reaction from an audience to me is as hack job as it gets, because it's like, dude, you don't have enough talent to just entertain your audience without having to be outrageous and salacious. You know what I mean?
yeah.
To me, that's really lame. And to me, that's like basically, you're basically giving the finger to your audience, because if you're going to buy into this, then you must be dumb. Because I don't honestly believe this. I'll just die on this dumb hill for some reason. And I think that's the most disingenuous thing. And I think that's been a huge problem with the industry. Huge problem.
It has been. It's been nuts. I mean, God bless for folks that are still left in there. First of all, the guys even who made millions upon millions of dollars, when no contracts come up, that's it. Because I mean, who's someone iHeartRadio has put a freeze on their hires. There's been a lot of places that have stopped. I think ESPN, I believe, are getting rid of like some 7,000 people or something ridiculous to where that route that stuff is going. So a lot of folks, I know there's thousands upon thousands of podcasts out there, and God bless the guys and girls who have to actually put in the hard work to make it successful and the determination to be able to do it. We've been fortunate enough for the last 3 years, and every single year I keep saying I'm going to do something different. And now adding the sports station, it adds more to me to be able to try to figure out, okay, where can I put in a broadcast, and where can I make a live, whether it be a live morning show, an evening drive show, whatever the case may be, to throw it together to be more competitive than regular radio, especially here in the Tampa market, because it's just there's no sports here. There's nothing to talk about. And I mean, you do have WDA, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same most places you go to. So it has become a dying breed. Satellite radio, they thought they were going to end up taking over the world. Satellite radio has also have taken a major fall from it as well. So it's just broadcasters the way they were before. It's a lost art on radio, and it's just, to me, it's just a crying shame. I
Yeah.
just think the passion's gone.
Yeah, I agree. And I just think that, the ability, the job was never about, knowing everybody's batting average and stats and all that. Like, anybody can Google that crap.
Mhm.
Like, who cares? The ability of the job was to be able to entertain an audience while talking about sports and other things as well. And when it became so cookie cutter and everybody's talking about the same thing with the same hot takes and everything, it just loses you know, it loses its luster in a big way. And I just think there's so many guys that just can't carry a show and can't entertain. You got to be able to entertain and go in there and not have some preconceived what the whole show's going to be, and roll with it, but be able to roll with it and be flexible enough to keep it entertaining, because it is a lot of hours. I mean, people look at it and go, "Oh, you only work for 4 hours a day." Well, it's not it's a 24-hour a day job, because you're
Yeah.
constantly planning for the next show. Because when you do radio, and I've done music radio as well, in spoken word, like you can't, you come back from a break and there's no calls there or anything. You can't go, here's Led Zeppelin, and just sit back for 5 minutes. It's air, and you got to be saying something, and you got to, be able to keep an audience while saying it. And that's, people say, oh, I could do that job. I go, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
They can't spit 3 words out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it listening to the people that are good at it makes everyone think they can do it. Just like anything else. I can do it because it sounds easy, because these guys are so good at it that it just sounds like it's not work or anything, or it's not that difficult. Trust me, when you first start, you're a fucking nightmare. I mean, it's brutal how bad you are. I mean, you're trying to sound like everybody you liked growing up. You're not yourself. Eventually you go, I got to get rid of all that and just be authentic and be myself. But it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of hours on the air, and it takes working in a crappy market and all that stuff, not making any money. But, that's how the business had a way of weeding itself out. Problem is now is that guys there's just not enough good talent out there that can entertain.
Yeah, I think the best person as we're getting ready to close it out here. The best story I ever heard was Harry Mays when he talked about how he didn't want to be a producer. He did everything he possibly could to screw up the job just so he could be the on-air host and broadcaster. I thought his story is hilarious, and when he tells it over and over again, it's funny because like I didn't want to be a producer. I'm not working the phones or anything else. I purposely screwed up the job just so I can be a broadcaster. And God bless him because he set out a goal to do it and he did it. You know,
He was working a regular job too. I mean, he was a guy making real good money in medical sales and the whole thing, and said, "I'm not happy with what I'm doing." Went to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, pivoted his career. I love Harry. You know, I mean, I do the IG's podcast with him. We did it today,
yeah,
and he's just such a unique guy. Like, I think that the reason why the audience identifies with Harry because Harry carries himself the way we wish we all could. You know what I mean? Just doesn't give a rat's ass, and he's just so chill and laid back and so simple in a lot of ways. But and he's funny and obviously very talented and smart and knows his stuff. He's a great sports guy, but great music guy. I mean, to me, I've always been a big fan of Harry, and I loved working with him. Like that Bernie from Broomall phone call when he called and we were playing the drop. I mean, that just totally happened by accident. Bernie called and I hit a drop, and then we just kept riding it. And oops, shit. And then we got radio gold out of it. But and Harry and I planned nothing. We literally would plan nothing before the show. I worked with Mike. We did a lot of planning, you know, some angles and things like that. With Harry, him and I would, if we started talking about something we wanted to talk about in the show, we'd just stop and say, let's not do the show before the show.
right.
We would listen to John DeBell on the way in every morning when I would drive him in when he broke his ankle, and just, you know, listen to music and stuff. We wouldn't talk about the show at all. When we got on the air, we'd do the show. You know, no, you know, fake back and forth. You take this side, I'll take that side arguments. None of that stupid stuff.
Yeah.
No, but that's what makes radio gold. You're absolutely right, because that's what makes it gold. I mean,
It was authentic.
What's that?
It was authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And listen, a lot of us obviously miss you guys on air. It was great, and I know I got about 2 minutes here before I wrap this up. That the funniest part also by Harry too, when they had the go kart, it was like God, it was about 10 years or so ago. When they had it in the morning, they had the go kart challenge out in Jersey, and at the end of it, like everything was over. I think it was a 3-hour event that morning, if I remember correctly. And Harry was standing around, and he looked over, and it was 10 o'clock. He goes, "Are we done?" And again, a couple of fans wanted to reach out to him and say, no, it's 10 o'clock. My show's over. That's it, right? All right, see you guys later. Jumped in the car, took off. He was off to the races. John and everybody else ended up hanging around, but it was funny to watch him do it because he didn't care. His thing was like when his time was up, it was up. He's out. That was it. You weren't arguing with him. But again, you got to respect
time,
the
let's be honest. The dude had a tea time. He's like, I got to be teeing off at number 1 by 10:45. I'm out of here.
He is one of the best. But listen, Jason, thank you once again for coming on with us. And again, as I said, the open invite, because we love having you on as many times as possibly can. We know during the season it's extremely hard, and we respect that. But anytime you're in the off season when we can squeeze you in, it's always a great time, especially before the season gets ramped up again. Because I would love to get the Flyers' take on a brand new season with a brand new rebuild. It's going to be absolutely great. And if you guys want to follow, of course, Jason Martinez, you guys again, the Flyers Daily with Jason. Great time during the NHL season, pregame, postgame. You want to get all the insight. Make sure you follow him also on Twitter and social media as well, because he does a fantastic job. So, Jason, once again, thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it.
Anytime, boys. Appreciate it.
No
problem.
Thank you, sir.
For everyone else,
See you guys.
enjoy your weekends, and we will see you all come next week.